My best friend gave a wedding speech, then tried to ruin my marriage. My best friend hijacked my wedding speech, then tried to convince my husband he shouldn't have married me. I, 29F, got married last year after a long engagement. My best friend Ria, 30F, and I had been inseparable for years. She wasn't my maid of honor, but she was deeply involved in the planning because she insisted on being included. She kept calling herself my emotional anchor during the process, saying she knew me better than anyone, that she could tell when I was forcing happiness, that she'd step in if I ever needed saving. About a month before the wedding, she started making comments that didn't sound supportive anymore. Not open attacks, more like constant warnings disguised as concern, asking if I was absolutely sure, saying things like, people rush into big commitments when they're scared of being alone, and I just don't want you waking up in 5 years realizing you ignored every red flag. I told her I was fine, happy, excited. I told her to stop projecting whatever she was dealing with onto me. She said she believed me, but she kept sending me late-night messages like, promise you'll tell me if you feel trapped, and I know you say you're okay, but I can hear it in your voice. I told her to back off. She laughed it off and said I was getting sensitive because of stress. On the wedding day itself, nothing exploded right away. The ceremony happened. The photos happened. Everyone smiled. I was exhausted but relieved and actually enjoying myself. Then Ria decided to give an unscheduled speech. She grabbed the mic without asking anyone. No introduction, no warning. She started talking about how she'd seen me through my worst relationships and how she hoped this one finally treats me right. People laughed, but not the comfortable kind. More like confused, unsure if this was supposed to be funny. My partner froze beside me, jaw clenched, not moving. She kept going, talking about how I always put everyone else first, and how she worried I was settling because I didn't think I deserved more. Then she said, if you ever need an escape, you know where to find me. No questions asked. That wasn't a joke. Her voice was dead serious when she said it. I laughed because I panicked and didn't want to see. I grabbed the mic back, said something awkward about loving supportive friends, and tried to move on. But the damage was already done. People were whispering. I saw my partner's friends staring at me like I'd just been exposed as secretly miserable. One of my relatives pulled me aside asking if I was okay and if I needed help. Ria acted like nothing happened. She kept hugging people, telling them she was just being protective. I pulled her aside and told her she crossed a line. She rolled her eyes and said, oh my God, don't start right now. I was trying to be there for you. I told her being there for me did not mean humiliating me in front of everyone. She snapped back. If you're embarrassed, that says more about your situation than my words. That pissed me off. I told her to stop acting like she knew my relationship better than I did. She said, I know you better than you know yourself. I told her that was arrogant and creepy. She told me I was being ungrateful. We got interrupted before it turned into a full-blown screaming match, and I didn't want to completely torch the rest of the night. So I walked away. After the wedding, things got worse fast. 2 days later, I started getting messages from people asking if I was okay, if I felt safe, if I was sure I hadn't rushed things. Someone literally wrote, Ria seems really worried about you. I asked what they meant, and they said she'd been posting vague stuff about watching someone you love make a mistake and not being able to stop it. I checked her social media and saw multiple posts about outgrowing friendships, loving someone enough to speak hard truths, and sometimes support looks like warning someone even if they hate you for it. People were commenting things like, you did the right thing, and some people need to hear it. I messaged her and told her to stop talking about me online. She replied, if the shoe fits, that's not my fault. I told her she was stirring drama and making it sound like I was in some kind of crisis. She said, if you don't want people worried about you, maybe don't ignore red flags. I lost it and told her she didn't get to decide what my red flags were. She replied, you always get defensive when you don't want to face reality. I told her to stop diagnosing my life like she was some expert. She said, I'm the only one who actually cares enough to tell you the truth. Then she started messaging my partner directly. I found out because he showed me the messages. She was asking him if he was ready for the responsibility and if he was sure he could give me what I needed emotionally. He replied once, politely, telling her he didn't think this was appropriate. She sent back, I just don't want her getting hurt again, like he was the next disaster waiting to happen. I confronted her and and told her to stay out of my marriage. She said, if you think getting married means your friends stop caring, that's not healthy. I told her caring does not mean interrogating my partner. She said, if he has nothing to hide, why is he uncomfortable? That set me off. I told her she was being manipulative and acting like she wanted something to be wrong. She said, or maybe I'm the only one brave enough to notice what everyone else is pretending not to see. At that point, I told her to stop contacting both of us. She replied with, wow, so now I'm a villain for being honest. Then she went quiet for a few days. Then the messages started coming from other people, not group chats, but individual messages, one after another, asking why I was pushing away someone who only wanted to protect me, asking if my partner was controlling who I talked to. Someone straight up asked if I was being isolated. I snapped and told them to stop assuming things about my life based on vague posts and gossip. One person told me I was being harsh and that Ria was clearly just worried. I told them worry doesn't give you permission to sabotage someone's relationship. They said I was overreacting. I told them they weren't the ones dealing with the fallout. Ria finally messaged me again saying, I never thought you'd choose him over me like this. I told her this wasn't a competition and that framing it that way was exactly the problem. She replied, I stood by you for years and now I'm disposable because you found someone new. I told her she wasn't disposable, but she was acting entitled to my life choices. She said, so I'm just supposed to sit back and watch you make a mistake? I said, yes, that's literally what respecting someone looks like. She told me I was being cruel. I told her she was being controlling. She said, you've changed. I told her, no, I finally stopped letting you talk over me. That's when she accused my partner of turning me against her. I told her that was insulting and lazy. She said, you never used to talk to me like this. I said, because I used to let you run over me and I'm done. She sent me a long message about how stressed she was during the wedding, how she felt ignored, how she thought she was losing me, how everything she did was out of fear. Then she followed it up with, so, if I said the wrong thing, it wasn't on purpose. I told her stress doesn't explain why she kept pushing after I asked her to stop. She said, I was fighting for you. I told her I never asked her to fight anything. Things escalated again when she posted another status about being cut off or caring too much. This time people started tagging me, asking why I was being cold. I replied publicly that she needed to stop framing herself as a victim when she was the one disrespecting boundaries. She messaged me immediately saying I was embarrassing her. I told her she embarrassed me first. She called me and started yelling that I was ruining her reputation. I yelled back that she ruined my wedding memories. She said, so one speech means I'm evil now? I said, it wasn't just the speech and you know it. She yelled that I was exaggerating. I told her she was rewriting everything to make herself look good. She accused me of abandoning her. I told her. She pushed me away. She said, after everything I did for you? I said, you don't get loyalty points for overstepping. She called me ungrateful. I told her she was obsessed with being needed. She screamed that I was heartless. I told her she was selfish for making my marriage about her feelings. We hung up furious. Since then, she's still posting, still hinting, still letting people assume things about my relationship. I've stopped responding to her, but I keep getting messages from people saying she's not doing well and that I should reach out because she's hurting too. Meanwhile, I'm the one who had my wedding turned into a rumor mill and my relationship treated like a problem that needed intervention. I haven't blocked her yet, but I've completely stopped engaging. My partner is angry and done with her. Some friends say I should cut her off completely. Others say I should forgive her because she meant well and was just overwhelmed. She keeps insisting it was all stress and fear of losing me, and that I'm throwing away years of friendship over one bad moment. Update 1. The morning after the wedding, I woke up to my phone buzzing nonstop. Not congratulations, not cute photos, messages asking if I was okay. One person straight up asked if I'd been pressured into getting married. Another asked if I was safe. Someone else said, if you need to talk, I'm here. I asked what they were talking about. No one wanted to say it directly, just vague replies like, I don't want to get in the middle, and I thought you should know people are worried about you. That already had my stomach in knots, but it got worse when my partner showed me his phone. Ria had messaged him the night of the wedding while I was busy talking to relatives and trying to keep things moving. Long messages, paragraphs, not flirty, not friendly. Worse than that, clinical, like she was analyzing me. She told him I had a pattern of jumping into things when I'm anxious. She said I panic when relationships stop feeling intense. She said he should pay attention to how quickly I commit and how scared I get of being alone. alone. She said she was just trying to protect me and that she'd feel guilty if she didn't say something. He hadn't replied because he didn't even know what to say to that. I felt sick reading it, like she'd taken every insecurity I'd ever vented about and packaged it into a warning label. I messaged her immediately and said, "Why are you messaging my husband like that?" She replied, "Because someone needed to be honest, and I knew you'd shut down if I said it to you." I said, "You embarrassed me during your speech, and now you're undermining my marriage behind my back." She said, "I didn't embarrass you. I told the truth." I said, "You don't get to define my truth." She said, "You've always hated when I point things out." I told her, "You don't point things out. You plant doubt and call it care." She snapped back and said I was defensive because I knew she was right. That's when it went from tense to full-on ugly. I told her she crossed a line and that she didn't get to act like a backup partner in my life. I said that exact phrase and she lost it. She said, "Oh please, I've cleaned up your messes for years. Don't pretend I haven't." I said, "You weren't cleaning anything. You were waiting for me to fail, so you could say you warned me." She called me ungrateful. I called her invasive. She said she felt pushed aside since I got engaged and that I dropped her the second someone else became more important. I said, "Then talk to me like an adult. Don't sabotage my relationship." She said, "Sabotage? You're being dramatic." I sent a few messages. I said, "You told my husband I have commitment issues on my wedding night." She said, "If he can't handle hearing the truth, that's not my problem." I told her she was acting like she had some kind of claim over me. She said, "After everything I've done for you, yeah, I expect not to be shut out." I told her she wasn't entitled to my marriage, my partner, or my decisions. She said, "So now I'm just disposable." I said, "Stop twisting this. This is about you crossing boundaries." She said, "Funny how boundaries only matter when they inconvenience you." At that point, I was shaking. I told her she turned my wedding into a mess, and now she was trying to make my relationship look unstable. She said, "If it looks unstable, maybe it is." That felt like a slap. I told her she was being cruel on purpose. She said, "No, I'm being realistic. You live in fantasy land when you're in love." I told her to stop acting like she knew what was best for me. She said, "Someone has to, because you make emotional decisions and then act shocked when they blow up." I told her that was insulting and she knew it. She said, "You've always hated hearing that you're impulsive." I said, "You've always hated when I don't let you run my life." She didn't deny it. She just said, "I'm not going to apologize for caring more than everyone else." Then she dropped this. She said she'd also talked to 2 other people at the wedding because she was worried and wanted them to keep an eye on me. That's when I started yelling. Actually yelling, not just typing in all caps. I told her she had no right to involve other people in my relationship. I told her she turned me into a project. I told her she was humiliating me and acting like I was unstable. She told me I was overreacting and that I always did this when I didn't want to hear criticism. I told her, "This is not criticism. This is you trying to control me." She said, "If you were in a good place, you wouldn't be this angry." I told her, "I'm angry because you're disrespecting me and pretending it's concern." She said, "So now I'm the villain because I spoke up." I said, "You're the villain because you won't stop even when I tell you to." She said, "You never used to shut me out like this." I said, "Because you never used to go behind my back like this." Before I tell you what happened in this story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment and tell us what you think about the story and how you would react. I want to hear your thoughts. She accused my partner of influencing me and said I sounded different. I told her that was insulting to both of us. She said, "I know you, and this isn't you." I told her, "This is me when I'm done being talked over." She sent a long message about how she felt replaced, how she felt like she was losing me, how she'd been anxious for weeks and felt ignored. I told her feeling insecure doesn't give her permission to interfere in my marriage. She replied, "So my feelings just don't matter anymore." I said, "Your feelings matter. Your actions are the problem." She said, "You're choosing him over me." I said, "I'm choosing my own life over your need to manage it." That's when she stopped responding to me and started posting vague stuff on social media about watching someone you love repeat the same mistakes and being punished for telling the truth. People started reacting to it, commenting things like, "You did what you could," and "Some people don't want to be helped." I got messages asking if I was pushing her away. Someone said I was being harsh. I told them to mind their business and stop assuming they they knew anything about my marriage. They said they were just concerned. I told them concern doesn't mean spreading doubt. Then I found out she'd also messaged my partner again, telling him she hoped he wasn't taking this personally and that she was only thinking about my well-being. He didn't respond, but he was furious. He said it felt like she was trying to put herself between us and that he didn't trust her anymore. I messaged her and told her to stop contacting him. She replied, "So now I'm not even allowed to check on you through him." I said, "You're not allowed to interrogate my husband about me." She said, "If you weren't acting so defensive, people wouldn't worry." I told her, "People are worried because you're making it sound like something is wrong." She said, "Maybe something is." At that point, I told her I needed space and that she needed to stop talking about me to other people. She replied, "Wow, so I'm silenced now too." I said, "You're not silenced. You're being asked to stop stirring things up." She said, "I guess I finally see where I stand." Since then, I've been getting messages from different directions, all slightly different versions of the same thing, asking if I'm okay, if I rushed, if I'm sure, if I'm happy. And every time I answer, I feel like I'm defending my own marriage to people who were smiling at me days ago. Update 2. She started posting throwback photos of us on Instagram. Old selfies, screenshots of inside jokes, pictures from trips and birthdays. The captions were all vague but pointed. Stuff about outgrowing people, watching friends change when they choose romance over loyalty, and being the one who always stays until you're no longer needed. She never tagged me. She didn't have to. Everyone knew exactly who she meant. Then she started doing the same thing on Facebook, longer posts this time, talking about how some people rewrite history when they don't want to face uncomfortable truths, and how it hurts when you give everything to someone and they discard you for a new life. My phone started lighting up again. Different people, same tone. "She's really hurting. Have you checked on her? I think she feels abandoned." One person said I should be the bigger person. Another said weddings are stressful and I should let things cool down. I finally messaged her and said, "Stop using social media to paint me as the villain." She replied, "If people see themselves in my posts, that's not my fault." I said, "You know exactly what you're doing." She said, "I'm allowed to express my feelings." I said, "You're manipulating the narrative." She said, "You're controlling it." I told her she was obsessed with being needed and furious that she wasn't my priority anymore. She said, "You're pretending this marriage magically erased your issues." I said, "And you're pretending concern excuses disrespect." She told me my husband was too quiet and that men like him build resentment and then explode later. I said, "You talk about him more than I do. That's weird." That set her off. She said I'd always been insecure and that without her I'd spiral like I always do. She said I need people to prop me up and that she'd been doing that for years while I pretended to be independent. I told her, "You want me dependent. That's the problem." She said, "No, I want you to be honest about how fragile you are." I said, "You don't get to label me because you're mad. I don't need your approval." She called me cruel. I called her controlling. Then she stopped messaging me directly and started venting to people instead. I'd get messages saying, "Ria says you won't talk to her," or "She feels like you cut her off overnight." One person straight up told me I was cold and that Ria had done a lot for me, so I owed her patience. I snapped back and said, "I don't owe anyone access to my marriage." They told me I was being dramatic. I told them they were being nosy and to stay out of it. Then Ria started sending me voice notes instead of text, long rambling ones where she'd cry, then get angry, then calm down, then cry again. She kept saying she felt replaced, that she didn't recognize me, that she was scared I was making a mistake. Every message somehow ended with how hurt she was that I wasn't listening to her. I told her, again, to stop talking about my relationship like it was a problem to solve. She said, "I'm not talking about your relationship. I'm talking about you." I said, "Those are not separate things." She said I was twisting her words. I said she was twisting my life. At one point, she told me that people had noticed I seemed quiet at the wedding and that she was just saying what others were thinking. I asked her who others were. She wouldn't answer, just said, "I'm not naming names." I told her that was cowardly and that she was hiding behind imaginary concern to justify her behavior. She said, "You always do this. You get defensive and then you shut down." I said, "No, I shut down when you won't respect what I'm telling you." She said, "You're isolating yourself and you don't even see it." I said, "You are literally the only person causing problems right now." She replied, "That's because I'm the only one brave enough to say it." Then she posted another thing on Facebook about watching someone self-destruct while pretending everything is perfect. People commented things like, "That must be so hard," and "Some people don't want help." I could feel my face getting hot just reading it. I messaged her and said, stop implying I'm unstable. She said, if you feel called out, that's on you. I told her she was being petty and vindictive. She said, or maybe I'm finally tired of protecting you. I said, protecting me from what? Being married? She said, from making the same mistakes you always make. I told her she didn't get to rewrite my past to fit her narrative. She said, you rewrite it to make yourself look stronger than you are. At that point, I was so angry I started shaking again. Before I tell you what happened in this story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment and tell us what you think about the story and how you would react. I want to hear your thoughts. I told her she was projecting her own fears onto me and that she needed to deal with her own issues instead of trying to control mine. She told me I was being nasty and that I'd changed since meeting my husband. I told her, no, I just stopped letting you talk over me. She said, so now I'm the problem in every story. I said, in this one, yes. That's when she stopped responding to me altogether. Instead, I started getting WhatsApp messages from people asking if I was okay, if I was being supported, if I was sure I wasn't being rushed into things. One person even asked if my husband was jealous of my friendships, which made me lose it. I told them that was insulting and that they had no idea what they were talking about. Then Ria sent my husband another message. This time it wasn't about me directly. It was about how she hoped he was taking care of himself and how she didn't want tension between everyone. He replied and told her to stop involving herself and to respect that we were handling things privately. She sent back, I'm just trying to keep the peace. He told her she was doing the opposite. She didn't respond to him after that, but she went back to posting. Update 3. This time it wasn't vague. It wasn't wrapped in concern. It was straight up positioning herself as some kind of safety net. She told him that if he ever felt trapped, she'd support whatever choice he made and that she just wanted him to know he wasn't alone if things got hard. He showed it to me immediately. I didn't even sit on it. I didn't wait to cool off. We were already around friends when it came up and I said out loud, I'm done pretending this is normal. I confronted her right there in front of everyone who was present. I said, why are you positioning yourself as an exit option from my marriage? She went stiff and said, that is not what I said. You're twisting it. I said, you told my husband you'd support whatever choice he made. That is literally planting the idea that leaving is on the table. She said, I said if he was ever unhappy, he deserves support. That's basic human decency. I said, from his wife, not from you. She rolled her eyes and said I was being paranoid and dramatic, like I always am when I don't like what I hear. That set me off. I said, you are circling my relationship like it owes you something. She said, you really think I want your life? Get over yourself. I said, then stop inserting yourself into it. She said I was threatened because I couldn't handle anyone else having influence in my life. I said she was predatory and hiding it behind friendship. She snapped back that I was ungrateful for everything she'd done for me over the years and that I wouldn't even be the person I am without her. I shouted that she didn't know my life just because she'd been part of it. People started telling us both to calm down, saying this wasn't the time or place, that we should take it private. I told them to stop trying to manage the situation and let her answer for what she'd been doing. She said I was humiliating her on purpose. I said, you've been humiliating me for weeks and pretending it's concern. She said I was choosing a man over real loyalty. I said, real loyalty doesn't look like trying to destabilize my marriage. She said I was rewriting history and acting like she'd never supported me. I said, supporting me doesn't mean trying to keep a door open for me to fail. She said, you always turn everything into an attack. I said, because you keep crossing lines and then acting shocked when I react. She told everyone I'd changed, that I used to trust her, that now I was cold and defensive and acting like she was some villain. I told her, you changed the second you decided my marriage was your business. She said she was just being honest and that no one else had the guts to say what she was thinking. I said, you're not brave, you're intrusive. She told me I was arrogant for thinking she was jealous. I said, then explain why you keep talking to my husband about leaving me. She said she never told him to leave me. I said, you don't have to say it directly when you're hinting at it every time you open your mouth. At that point, she started crying and said I was attacking her and making her look like a monster. I said, stop using tears like a shield when you started this. Someone tried to pull me aside and tell me I was going too far. I told them to stop policing my reaction when they hadn't said a word word about her behavior. She yelled that I was always like this, that I explode, and then pretend I'm the victim. I yelled back that she provokes, and then hides behind the fact that she's loudest about being hurt. She said I was throwing away years of friendship over one message. I said, it's not one message, it's weeks of you undermining me and pretending it's for my own good. She said I was dramatic, and that my marriage wouldn't survive if I reacted this intensely to everything. I said, you don't get to predict the failure of something you keep trying to sabotage. She accused me of turning everyone against her. I said, no, you did that when you started telling people I'm unstable. She said she never used that word. I said, you don't need to say it when you imply it in every conversation. She told me I was cruel and that I always need someone to blame when things get complicated. I told her she needs to be needed and can't stand when she's not the center of my decisions anymore. She said, so now I'm just some controlling friend in your story. I said, right now, yes. That's when she grabbed her things and stormed out, telling everyone she couldn't believe how I'd treated her and that she was done being attacked for caring too much. After she left, it didn't get quieter. It just shifted. People started telling me I shouldn't have blown up like that I should have handled it privately, that she was clearly emotional, and I made it worse. I snapped at one person and said, she's been messaging my husband about leaving me. What part of that is private friendly behavior? Another person said I was overinterpreting it and that Ria was just trying to be supportive. I told them, then she can support me, not try to become his backup plan. Someone else said, you know how she is. She gets intense. I said, then she should learn to control it instead of expecting everyone else to accommodate it. By the end of that night, my phone was already filling up again. Some people asking if I was okay. Some people telling me I'd gone too far. One person straight up said I embarrassed her and that I should apologize. I didn't respond to that one. Then Ria posted again, not about friendship this time, but about being attacked for caring and how some people don't want to hear hard truths and how she was done setting herself on fire to keep others warm. Comments rolled in supporting her, telling her she deserved better friends, that she was too kind for people who don't appreciate her. I didn't comment. I didn't post. I just watched it all happen and felt like the situation was spiraling into something I couldn't control anymore. Later that night, she finally sent me a message. It wasn't an apology. She said I'd crossed a line by confronting her in front of people, that I'd humiliated her, and that she expected me to take responsibility for how I'd spoken to her. I replied and said, you crossed the line when you involved my husband in your doubts about my marriage. She said, so now everything is my fault. I said, right now, yes, because you won't stop. She told me I was impossible to talk to and that she was done trying. I said, you stopped trying to respect me a long time ago. She didn't respond after that, but the fallout didn't stop. Messages kept coming from different directions, all with slightly different versions of the same story, and none of them matching what I'd actually been dealing with. Update 4. My partner got another message from her. This time it wasn't supportive. It was angry. She told him he should really think about what kind of person he married and that I was emotionally volatile and pushing people away like I always do. She said she was worried he'd regret this and that she'd warned him. He didn't respond. He showed me instead. I was shaking reading it. I messaged her and said, you need to stop contacting my husband. This is not concern. This is harassment. She replied immediately and said, maybe if you weren't constantly controlling the narrative, people wouldn't feel the need to reach out. I said, you are not a victim here. You're interfering. She said, I'm not interfering. I'm protecting someone who doesn't see what he's walking into. That's when I told her we were done talking privately and that if she had something to say about me, she could say it to my face again. She said fine. So we met with people around. Not a party, not some dramatic gathering, just people who were already in the middle of this mess and had opinions whether I wanted them or not. The second she walked in, she was already crying. Not quiet crying, loud, shaky. Look at me crying. She said she couldn't believe I'd turned everyone against her and that she felt ambushed. I said, no, you feel confronted. She said I was aggressive and always needed someone to fight. I said, you keep messaging my husband about leaving me. What reaction were you expecting? She said she never told him to leave me. My partner finally spoke up and said, you told me to think about what kind of person I married and said you warned me. What was that supposed to mean? She said she was just being honest. He said, it wasn't your place. She snapped and said, someone had to say something since she refuses to hear it. I cut in and said, you don't get to decide what I need to hear. She said, I always shut down when people challenge me. I said, no, I shut down when people disrespect me and call it honesty. She said said I was twisting everything. I said, then explain why you keep positioning yourself between me and my husband. She said she wasn't positioning herself. She was just available if things went wrong. I said, why are you planning for my marriage to fail? She yelled, because I've seen you sabotage your own relationships before. That hit hard, and she knew it. I yelled back, you don't get to drag my past into my marriage like it's a warning label. She said I was unstable and always one step away from blowing up. I said, and you're always one step away from inserting yourself where you don't belong. She accused me of abandoning her the second I got engaged. I said, I didn't abandon you. I stopped letting you run my life. She said I replaced her. I said, you were never supposed to be in that position in the first place. She lost it at that point and started yelling that she had been there for me when no one else was, that she'd stayed up with me through breakups, through bad decisions, through messes I created. I said, and somehow that turned into you thinking you get veto power over my future. She said, you wouldn't even have him if I hadn't pushed you to get out more. My partner snapped and said, you don't get to take credit for my relationship. She told him he was blind and naive. He said, and you're crossing lines you don't get to cross. She turned on him and said he was isolating me from people who actually knew me. I stepped in and said, stop blaming him for your behavior. She said I was letting him control me. I said, you sound exactly like someone who can't stand not being the most important voice in my head anymore. Someone tried to interrupt and say this was getting out of hand. I said, it's been out of hand for weeks, and everyone kept pretending it was just feelings. She accused me of humiliating her again. I said, you humiliated me at my wedding and didn't care. She said it was a joke. I said, then why did you keep going afterward in private? She said she was trying to protect me from making another mistake. I said, you decided my marriage was a mistake before it even started. She said she just knew me better than anyone else. I said, then you should know when to stop. She yelled that I was selfish and ungrateful, and that I always take and never appreciate what people do for me. I yelled back that she thrives on being needed and can't handle not being the hero in my story. She said I was cruel and cold and that I'd changed into someone she didn't recognize. I said, and you turned into someone who thinks my life is a group project. She told everyone I was choosing a man over years of friendship. I said, no, I'm choosing my own boundaries over your entitlement. She told me I'd regret this and that when things fell apart, I'd have no one to blame but myself. I said, stop predicting my failure like it's something you're waiting for. She told my partner that when he finally saw who I really was, she'd be there to pick up the pieces. That was the last thing. I said, do not talk about my marriage like it's already dead. She said, I'm just being realistic. I said, you're being disrespectful and obsessed, and I'm done letting you pretend it's love. I told her not to contact me or my husband again, and not to talk about my relationship like it belongs to her. She laughed and said, so you're cutting me off now? I said, you've been cutting yourself into my marriage. This stops now. She called me heartless. I said, and you're invasive. She stormed out again, this time shouting that she was done being treated like the villain, and that she hoped I enjoyed pushing away the only person who ever really cared about me. After she left, everything was chaos in a quieter way. Some people said I was right, but that I should have handled it differently. Others said I was too harsh, and that Ria was clearly hurting. One person told me I should apologize just to smooth things over. I said, I'm not apologizing for telling someone to stop messaging my husband about leaving me. That didn't go over well with everyone. By the next day, she'd blocked me everywhere, but not before posting more about betrayal, about being discarded, about how some people rewrite history to justify cruelty. People kept sending me screenshots asking if it was about me. I didn't respond to those either. Then she messaged my partner one last time before blocking him too, telling him she hoped he was happy and that she'd tried to warn him. He didn't reply. After that, mutual friends started pulling away in small ways. Fewer messages, fewer check-ins. A couple of people unfollowed me. A couple unfollowed her. It felt like invisible lines getting drawn without anyone saying them out loud. I didn't post anything. I didn't defend myself publicly. I didn't respond to the vague posts or the private commentary floating around. At this point, the friendship is done. Not paused. Not cooling off. Done. There's no apology coming from her. There's no conversation left to have. And the fallout is still spreading in quiet ways I can't control. The end. Rhea turned your wedding plus marriage into her personal drama tour, complete with public doubt-planting speech. Creepy late night, are you trapped? Texts psychoanalyzing you to your husband on your wedding night, offering herself as his escape hatch if things go south, and non-stop vague book pity posts to make you look unstable while she plays tragic hero. She's not concerned. She's jealous, controlling, and low-key trying to keep you single/dependent on her forever. Classic, I know you better than you know yourself. Entitlement mixed with sabotage. NTA 1000%. Cut her off, block the flying monkeys who buy her victim act, and protect your marriage. You didn't throw away a friendship. You stopped letting someone treat your life like their side quest. Good riddance. Enjoy being married without the emotional vampire hovering. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Got a story to share? Drop it in the comments and let us know which one was your favorite.